He didn't say hi. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just sent a photo of a forged document and a deadline. Pay $48,000 by noon tomorrow. Or he reports me for authorizing it. He threatened to ruin my career, thinking I would fold. But I don't panic for a living. I hunt patterns. I put my tea down, open my laptop, and prepared to turn his little threat into a full-blown confession. My name is Stella Powell. I am 35 years old, and I have spent the last decade of my life making sure that lines are never crossed. I work as a senior compliance specialist for Marston Ridge Financial, a job that requires a personality type that sits somewhere between a forensic accountant and a paranoid librarian. I do not deal in gray areas. I deal in binary code, audit trails, and the absolute terrifying certainty of the law. My apartment reflects this. The coasters are aligned. The blinds are drawn to the exact same height. The silence is not empty. It is curated. It was a Saturday morning, the only time I allow myself to decompress. I was standing in the center of my kitchen, the morning light filtering through the high windows, holding a mug of Earl Grey tea that was exactly the temperature I preferred. I took a sip, letting the bergamot settle on my tongue, and for a singular, fleeting second, I felt safe. Then my phone vibrated against the granite countertop. It was not a ring. It was a single, heavy buzz that felt like an insect landing on my skin. I glanced down. The name on the screen was simply Father, not Dad, not Dale. Just the biological designation he had always preferred when he needed to assert authority. I did not want to pick it up. My stomach tightened. A Pavlovian response trained into me over 3 decades of manufactured crises and guilt trips. But in my line of work, you do not ignore red flags. You investigate them. I unlocked the phone. There was no greeting. He did not ask how I was. He did not ask about my recent promotion or if I was happy. There was just a photograph and a caption. I tapped the image to enlarge it. It was a grainy, low-light picture of a physical document lying on a dark wooden table. My father's dining table. I zoomed in. It was a financing agreement for a condominium development called the Azure Heights. My eyes scanned the boilerplate text with the speed of a professional, skipping the fluff and hunting for the liability, and then I saw it. At the bottom of the page, on the line marked Guarantor, was a signature. Stella Powell. It was a clumsy forgery. The loop on the S was too wide, and the double L in my surname leaned to the left, whereas mine always stood straight. To a layman, it might pass. To a bank teller in a rush, it might pass. But to me, it looked like a threat written in ink. I lowered the image and read the text message underneath it. Pay $48,000 by 12 p.m. tomorrow, or I report you for authorizing it. I will ruin your career. I stared at the screen. The words did not make sense at first. They floated there, disjointed, like a puzzle with the wrong pieces. $48,000, noon tomorrow, ruin. I set my mug down on the counter. My hand was shaking. Just a fraction. A tremor so slight only I could feel it. I forced my fingers to unclench. This was the moment most people would panic. This was the moment a daughter would call her father, crying, begging for an explanation, asking why he would do this. But I am not just a daughter. I am an auditor of human error. I read the text again, analyzing it not as a family member, but as a compliance officer analyzing a suspicious transaction report. The tone was not desperate. It was confident. It was rehearsed. He had not typed this in a fit of rage. He had drafted it. He had likely calculated the exact time to send it. Saturday morning, when the banks were closed to the public, when corporate HR was offline, when I would feel most isolated. He was leveraging the timeline. He wanted $48,000. That was the buy-in. But the leverage was the document. The brilliance of the trap was sickening. If I paid the money to make the problem go away, the paper trail of the transfer would look like an admission of guilt. It would look like I was covering a debt I had legally agreed to. If I refused to pay, he would report me to my own industry regulators. He would claim I had used my position to authorize a fraudulent loan for family, then reneged. Even a hint of an ethics violation triggers an automatic suspension in my field. An investigation, even if I was eventually cleared, would leave a permanent mark on my license. It is called reputational risk, and in high finance, it is fatal. He was asking me to choose between my money or my life. I looked at the signature again. It was close enough. If he submitted that document to Marston Ridge's ethics board, they would have to open a file. They would suspend my access immediately. They would confiscate my laptop. I would be escorted out of the building by the same security guards I greeted every morning. My chest constricted. The air in the kitchen felt suddenly thin. Panic is what guilty people do. I told myself. The voice in my head was sharp, commanding. Panic is an admission. Do not panic. I did not reply to the text. To reply is to engage, and to engage is to validate his premise. I turned away from the phone and walked to the dining table where my work laptop sat in its leather case. I sat down. I opened the lid. The screen came to life, requesting my credentials. I typed my password with steady fingers. I waited for the two-factor authentication code, approved it, and watched the secure VPN tunnel connect. The familiar blue dashboard of the Marston Ridge internal compliance system loaded. This was my turf. This was where I had power. If Dale Powell wanted to play a game of documentation. He had severely underestimated his opponent. He thought he was threatening a scared little girl. He forgot he was threatening a woman who hunted financial predators for a living. I navigated to the internal search portal. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a dull, heavy rhythm, but my mind was icy. I typed in my own social security number. It is a violation of protocol to access client accounts without a business case. But this was not a client account. This was my identity. If someone was using my name to secure leverage, I had every right to see the blast radius. I hit enter. The system thought for a moment. The little circle spinning, I held my breath. Part of me, the part that still wanted to believe in the inherent goodness of family, hoped the screen would return 0 results. I hoped that the document in the photo was just a prop, a piece of paper he had scribbled on at home to scare me, something that had never actually been submitted to a financial institution. The screen refreshed. 1 active record found. The air left my lungs in a sharp hiss. It was real. A loan application for a condominium unit at the Azure Heights. Status, pending final disbursement. My eyes flew across the data fields. The application had been initiated 3 weeks ago. The primary applicant was listed as Harper Powell, my younger sister. The guarantor was listed as Stella Powell. The income verification documents were attached. I clicked on them. They were fake. But they were good fakes. They listed my salary accurately. They listed my job title accurately. They even had a mocked-up version of a Marston Ridge employment verification letter. I felt a wave of nausea. This was not just a text message. This was wire fraud. This was identity theft. And it was already mid-process. The bank handling the loan, a mid-sized lender we often partnered with, had already approved the preliminary underwriting. They were just waiting for the final closing fees and the down payment transfer. $48,000. That was the down payment. The puzzle pieces snapped together with a terrifying click. Harper did not have the money for the condo. She never had money. She barely held down a job as a freelance event coordinator. Dale had likely pushed her into this, promised her he would handle the down payment, promised her the world, just to keep up appearances. But Dale didn't have $48,000 either, so they needed a donor, and they chose me. But they didn't ask me. They couldn't ask me. Because they knew I would say no. I had stopped giving them money 5 years ago when I realized my savings account was being treated as their emergency fund. So they had simply taken my name. They had forged the documents, gotten the loan approved to the final stage, and now, facing the deadline for the cash to close, they were presenting me with the bill. It was extortion, pure and simple. My phone buzzed again. I looked over at the counter. Another message from Dale. Do the right thing for your sister. I stared at the words. The audacity was breathtaking. Do the right thing. As if paying for a fraud I didn't commit was a moral obligation. As if my career, my license, and my decade of hard work were nothing more than a coupon he could cash in to buy Harper a condo she couldn't afford. He wasn't worried about the law. He wasn't worried about the bank catching him. He was so arrogant, so secure in his control over me, that he believed I would burn myself to keep them warm. He believed that the fear of him was greater than the fear of the federal government. For 35 years, he had been right. I looked back at the laptop screen. I looked at the timestamp on the application log. I looked at the IP address associated with the digital upload of the forged letter. He wanted $48,000 by noon tomorrow. He wanted me to wire it quietly, to accept the role of the dutiful daughter, to save Harper from her own incompetence and save him from his own greed. I felt something shift inside me. It was not a break. It was a hardening. It was the sound of a steel door slamming shut and locking. I was not going to pay him, and I was not going to ignore him. I was going to do exactly what a compliance officer does when they find an anomaly. I was going to pull the thread until the whole sweater unraveled. I reached out and picked up my tea. It was cold now, but I drank it anyway. The bitterness was grounding. I looked at the text message one last time. The threat, the demand, the confident bullying. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. My voice was steady. "If you want a story, Dale, I will give you a documented one." I turned back to the keyboard. I did not close the window. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Case File 001. Then, I began to take screenshots. I cracked my knuckles and leaned into the screen. The blue light of the monitor was the only warmth in the room. I was no longer a daughter drinking tea. I was a forensic auditor dissecting a carcass. The first rule of compliance investigation is that people lie. But data does not. People can delete texts. People can shred paper. But in a digital banking environment, every keystroke, every login, and every hover of a mouse cursor leaves a footprint in the snow. My father thought he had sent me a picture of a document. In reality, he had sent me a map of his own crime. I navigated to the identity verification logs associated with the loan application. In the financial world, we call this the digital handshake. It is the moment the system asks, "Are you really who you say you are?" And the user answers. If my father and Harper had pulled this off, they hadn't just guessed, they had logged in as me. I pulled the raw access data. The system spat out a spreadsheet filled with timestamps, IP addresses, and device identifiers. I expanded the columns, my eyes scanning for the anomaly. It took me less than 10 seconds to find it. Most of the access points to my personal banking profiles over the last year originated from two specific locations. The first was the static IP address of my apartment. The second was the secure server of the Marston Ridge corporate network. Those were my footprints. But there, sandwiched between a login from last Tuesday and a credit check from yesterday, was a third location. The access point was logged at 7:45 in the evening. 3 weeks ago, I highlighted the row. I copied the IP address and dropped it into a geolocation tool we use to flag money laundering risks. The map loaded instantly. A red pin dropped onto a familiar grid of suburban streets. It wasn't a generic location like a coffee shop or a public library. It was a residential address. 74 Oak Creek Lane. My parents' house. I didn't gasp. I didn't feel surprised. I just felt a cold, hard verification settle in my gut. I took a screenshot of the map next to the IP log. Capturing the date and time, I saved it to the folder Case File 001 with the file name Evidence Location Match. But the location was just the setting. I needed the weapon. I shifted my attention to the device identifier column. Every phone and laptop broadcasts a specific signature, a user agent string, that tells the server what kind of device is knocking at the door. My personal phone is a Pixel. My work laptop is a ThinkPad. The device that had accessed the loan application portal was neither. The log read, iPhone 14 Pro, iOS 16.4. I stared at the text. Harper had upgraded her phone 2 months ago. I remembered because she had complained about the monthly payments during a dinner I paid for. She had sat there, scrolling through Instagram on her new titanium case device while I paid the check. I took another screenshot. This time, I circled the device ID in red digital ink. Evidence device Harper. They had been sloppy. That was the insult that stung more than the theft. They hadn't even bothered to use a VPN or a burner phone. They had committed a federal crime from the comfort of their living room sofa, probably while watching television, using a device registered in Harper's own name. They were so confident that I would never check, or that I would be too scared to look, that they hadn't even wiped their feet before walking through my life. I moved to the next tab. Security Challenge Protocol. To initiate a loan of this size, the system triggers what we call knowledge-based authentication. These are the questions that are supposed to be impossible for a stranger to answer. What was the name of your first pet? What is your mother's maiden name? In which county was your first car registered? I looked at the audit trail for the challenge session. Question 1. What was the model of your first car? Answer. Honda Civic. Time to answer. 2 seconds. Question 2. What is your paternal grandmother's first name? Answer. Eleanor. Time to answer. 1.5 seconds. Question 3. What street did you grow up on? Answer. Oak Creek. Time to answer. 1 second. I stared at the timestamps. There was no hesitation, no pausing to think. A stranger stealing my identity would have to look these things up. A hacker would have to search public databases, but the person entering these answers knew them by heart. They knew them because they were there when I drove that Honda Civic home. They were there when Grandma Eleanor visited for Christmas. They lived on Oak Creek Lane. They had used our shared history as a skeleton key. The intimacy of family was just another data point to exploit. I felt a flash of heat behind my eyes, but I pushed it down. Emotions are noise. I needed signal. I took a screenshot of the questions and answers. I annotated the image with a note. Assailants possess intimate familial knowledge. No brute force detected. Passwords entered manually. I was building a wall of bricks, one screenshot at a time. Then I found the document. The loan application required a letter of explanation regarding the sudden credit inquiry. It was a standard request when a guarantor takes on a large liability. The system showed a PDF upload titled Statement of Financial Guarantee. I downloaded the file and opened it. It was a letter, typed on a clean white background, addressed to the underwriting team at the lender. I read the words, and for a moment, I felt a ghostly sense of dissociation. The voice sounded like me. The phrasing was professional. It used words like fiscal responsibility and asset liquidity. It was succinct, polite, and firm. It was exactly the kind of letter I would write. To whom it may concern. It began. Please accept this letter as confirmation of my intent to guarantee the financing for Unit 4B at Azure Heights. I have reviewed the terms and find them agreeable to my current financial standing. It was good. It was very good. Dale must have gone through my old emails. Perhaps things I had sent him years ago when I helped him with his taxes, to mimic my cadence. He had studied me, but he hadn't studied me enough. My eyes narrowed on the second paragraph. I am fully aware of the obligations detailed herein, and I am prepared to execute the necessary wire transfers upon final approval. I stopped. I read it again, and then a small, cold smile touched my lips. There it was, the mistake, the microscopic fracture in the forgery that proved, without a shadow of a doubt, that I had not written this letter. I am a senior compliance officer. I live and die by the code of federal regulations, in my professional writing, and even in my personal financial correspondence. I never, ever use the phrase wire transfers without specifying the clearinghouse protocol. I am pedantic about it. It is a quirk of my training. I always write wire funds via FedWire or electronic funds transfer. But that wasn't the smoking gun. That was just a hint. The real error was the date. At the top of the letter, the date was typed, October 12th, 2025. I stared at it. October 12th. The ordinal suffix, the th. I have not written a date with an ordinal suffix in a professional document since I was an intern. In the banking industry, specifically in compliance logs, we use a standard format to avoid ambiguity. We write October 12th, 2025, or we use the ISO format, October 12, 2025. We never use the, st, or nd. It is messy. It is amateur. And more importantly, my laptop's autocorrect settings are hard-coded to remove them if I had typed that date on this machine. The th would have vanished automatically. The fact that it remained meant the document was created on a different machine, one with default settings, one like a home desktop or an iPad. I zoomed in on the date. I took a screenshot. Then I opened a recent authentic letter I had written to my insurance company last month, highlighted the date format there, and placed the two images side by side. The contrast was stark. The forgery was casual. My work was clinical. I saved the comparison as evidence linguistic discrepancy. I was gathering plenty of defensive ammo, but I needed to understand the mechanics of the attack. How had they gotten this far without the bank calling me? Usually, for a transaction of $48,000, a verbal confirmation is standard protocol. A risk officer should have called my cell phone. I went back to the log, digging deeper into the notes section of the application file. These are the internal comments bank employees leave for each other, the stuff customers aren't supposed to see. But since I was logged in as the customer and the system was poorly configured, I could see the history of the agent's actions. I scrolled down to 3 days ago. There was a note from a loan officer named K. Miller. Note: guarantor requested rush processing. Cited medical emergency involving primary applicant. Requested no phone verification due to hospital setting. Exception approved by manager T. Davis. I froze. Medical emergency. They hadn't just forged my signature. They had created a fake crisis to bypass security protocols. They had told the bank that Harper, or perhaps me, was in a hospital, likely unable to speak. To explain why I couldn't answer the phone, they used the excuse of a tragedy to silence the alarms. It was a rush exception in banking. This is the vulnerability everyone fears. It is the human element. If you make a story sad enough and urgent enough, people stop looking at the checklist and start trying to be helpful. Dale knew this. He knew that kindness is a security flaw. He had weaponized the bank's empathy against me. I realized then that his threat to report me wasn't just a bluff. It was the second half of a pincer movement. He had already set the stage. If I tried to fight this by simply saying, "I didn't do it," he would point to the rush exception. He would say, "She begged us to push it through. She said it was an emergency. Now she's cold feet?" He had created a narrative where I was the erratic, emotional one, and he was the steady hand trying to hold the deal together. If this went to a standard investigation, it would be my word against the documented emergency he had fabricated. And in my industry, even the suspicion of erratic financial behavior is enough to strip my clearance. He was banking on my fear. He was banking on the fact that I would calculate the risk. See the complexity of untangling this lie, and decide that $48,000 was a cheaper price to pay than a destroyed reputation. He was right about the risk, but he was wrong about the calculation. I wasn't going to pay, and I wasn't just going to report it. If I reported it now, it would be a messy internal dispute. He would lie. Harper would lie. It would be a family squabble in the eyes of the law. I needed them to do something undeniable. I needed them to walk into a trap that they had set for themselves. I looked at the clock on my laptop. It was 11:30 in the morning. I had less than 24 hours before his deadline. I opened the export tool. I selected every single log, every screenshot, every IP trace, and every note I had found. I compiled them into a single, encrypted zip file. I named it Project Blue Glass. Then, I opened my private, encrypted email client. Not my work email, not the Gmail account they knew about, but a secure server I used for sensitive archival. I attached the file. In the body of the email, I typed a summary of my findings, referencing the specific timestamps and the identity of the suspected perpetrators. I hit send. The timestamp on the email was immediate and immutable. It was a digital postmark. No matter what happened next, I now had proof that as of this moment, I was aware of the fraud and was documenting it. If Dale tried to claim later that I was part of it, this email would prove I was investigating it as a crime before the money ever moved. I sat back. My tea was gone. The silence in the apartment was heavy, but it no longer felt oppressive. It felt like the silence of a hunting blind. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just stop the transaction. That would only save me this time. They would try again. They would find another way to bleed me. Dale would find another lever to pull. I had to break the lever. I needed to make them believe they had won. I needed to feed their greed until it choked them. I needed to move the battlefield from the digital world, where they could hide behind screens and forged PDFs, to the physical world, where cameras were watching and where police officers carried handcuffs. I closed the laptop lid. The screen went black. I picked up my phone. I saw the notification of Dale's text still sitting there. Do the right thing. I will, I said aloud. I stood up and walked to my bedroom. I pulled my suitcase from the top shelf of the closet. It was a carry-on. Hard shell. Efficient. I didn't pack clothes for a vacation. I packed for an extraction. I was going to buy that ticket. I was going to send that text. I was going to give Dale Powell exactly what he wanted. A daughter who looked like she was running away. Because the only way to catch a predator who thinks he is chasing prey is to stop running and turn around when he is mid-leap. I opened my banking app on my phone. But not to transfer money. I opened it to find the branch locations for the lender they were using. I needed a specific stage for the final act. I found it, a branch downtown, with a secure layout and, most importantly, high-definition surveillance in the lobby. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. It was time to write the script for tomorrow's performance. I sat on the edge of my bed, the open suitcase gaping like a hungry mouth at my feet. I had thrown in 2 blazers, a stack of crisp white shirts, and my travel toiletries. But my hands had stopped moving. The adrenaline that had powered me through the investigation phase was beginning to recede, leaving behind a hollow, aching space in my chest. This is the danger of the quiet moments. When the data processing stops, the memories start. I looked at the phone in my hand, specifically at the contact photo for Harper. It was a selfie she had taken 2 years ago at a music festival I had paid for. She looked radiant, wild, and free. Her hair was full of glitter, her smile was wide, and she looked like a creature who had never known a consequence in her life. Harper has always been the creative one. That was the family brand for her. Harper was artistic. Harper was spirited. Harper was a free soul who could not be tethered by the mundane restrictions of budgets or deadlines or gravity. But in the Powell household, creative was just a polite synonym for expensive. It was a code word that meant Harper created the chaos, and I was expected to create the silence that followed it. I closed my eyes and the ledger of the last 15 years opened in my mind. It wasn't just this condo. It was never just one thing. It was a slow, dripping accumulation of deficits that I was always expected to fill. I remembered the photography phase when she was 22. She needed a professional camera because she had found her calling. Dale had called me, his voice tight, telling me that we needed to support her vision. I bought the camera, $2,000 on a credit card I had just paid off. She used it for 3 weeks, took blurry photos of fire hydrants, and then sold it at a pawn shop for cash to go to Cabo with a boyfriend whose name she couldn't remember a month later. I didn't get the money back. I got a hug. I got told I was the best big sister in the world. Then there was the jewelry-making business, the vintage clothing reseller phase, the life coaching certification. Every single time, the script was identical. Harper would have a manic burst of enthusiasm. Dale would buy into the fantasy that this was the thing that would finally launch her. And when the bill came due, they would turn to me. They never asked me if I could afford it. They never asked if I had plans for my own money. Dale didn't ask me for help the way a father asks a daughter. He issued tasks. He managed the family like a failing corporation where he was the CEO. Harper was the erratic talent, and I was the accounts payable department. "Stella, handle this," he would say, not, "Stella, can you help?" Just, "Handle this." I remembered the time Harper's car broke down 3 years ago. She had called me sobbing from the side of the highway. It was a transmission failure. The repair was $1,800. She didn't have it. Dale didn't have it. I had been saving for a down payment on my own place, a small studio closer to the city. I paid the mechanic. I remember standing in that grease-stained waiting room, swiping my debit card, feeling the physical weight of my savings dropping. When I got home, I expected a conversation. I expected a plan for repayment. Instead, I got a text from Dale. "Good girl, you saved the day. Good girl." The phrase echoed in my empty apartment, bouncing off the walls. That was his currency. That was the coin he paid me in. He trained me like a border collie. If I was quiet, if I was compliant, if I fixed the things Harper broke without making a scene, I was a good girl. I realize now, staring at the ceiling, that I had never been a person to him. I was a utility. I was a faucet. When the water was running, nobody noticed the plumbing. They only noticed me when the flow stopped. My resentment wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow-acting poison that I had been swallowing for decades. I had told myself I was helping. I had told myself that this was what family did. But family is supposed to be a circle of support, not a pyramid scheme where the people at the bottom feed the people at the top. I walked over to my dresser and picked up the framed photo of the four of us from my college graduation. I was wearing my gown, holding my diploma with a grip that looked painful. Harper was wearing a bright yellow sundress, looking bored, checking her phone. Dale had his arm around her, not me. He was smiling at someone off camera, looking proud. But was he proud of my degree? Or was he just proud that he had successfully managed to get everyone in the frame? The pattern clicked into place with a sickening clarity. Dale's ego was entirely invested in Harper. She was his reflection, the wild, charming, exciting parts of himself that he felt he had sacrificed. He needed her to succeed, or at least to appear successful, because her failure would mean his failure. I was different. I was the control group. I was the boring, reliable machinery that kept the lights on. He didn't need to worry about my image because my image didn't reflect on him. I was just there. I was the scapegoat not because I was weak, but because I was strong enough to carry the weight they refused to lift. They targeted me because they knew I would survive it. They cannibalized me because I always grew back. It is a terrible thing to realize your parents love you for your function, not your essence. I sat back down and unlocked my phone again. I didn't look at the recent threat. I scrolled back. I went back years. I wanted to see the architecture of our relationship. I found a text from 2 years ago regarding a missed rent payment of Harper's. Dale. She's going to get evicted. Wire the landlord. We can't have her on the street. Me. Dad. I'm tight this month. Dale. Don't be selfish. Stella. You have a salary. She has a dream. Do it. Don't be selfish. I scrolled further back. 4 years ago. A legal issue where Harper had sideswiped a parked car and drove off. Dale. Fix this. Talk to the owner. Pay them off so they don't file a report. We can't have a record on her. Me. She broke the law. Dale. She made a mistake. You fix mistakes. That's what you do. That's what you do. The commands were always short, absolute. There was never a question mark at the end of his sentences. He used the imperative mood almost exclusively. Wire, send, fix, handle. He didn't speak to me like a father speaking to an adult woman. He spoke to me like a handler speaking to an asset. And the threat he had sent today, pay $48,000 or I report you, was not a deviation from the pattern. It was the culmination of it. It was the final evolution of his management style. He had gone from guilt-tripping me to extracting from me, and now, when the extraction failed, he had moved to extortion. He must have been planning this for weeks. He must have looked at Harper's desperate situation with the condo, looked at his own empty pockets, and thought, Stella will cover it, and if she hesitates, I will make sure she has no choice. He viewed my career, the reputation I had built over 10 years of 60-hour weeks, as just another asset he could liquidate if the family needed cash. He was willing to burn my license to keep Harper warm. I felt the tears prick at the corners of my eyes, hot and sharp, but I did not let them fall. I am not a crier. I am a closer. I looked at the timestamps on the old messages. He always sent them late at night or early in the morning. He attacked when defenses were low. He was tactical, but so was I. I stood up and walked to the mirror. I looked at the woman staring back. She looked tired. She looked pale, but she did not look broken. "You are not the bailout fund," I said to the reflection. "You are not the insurance policy." I went back to the open suitcase. I packed the rest of my things with a mechanical precision. I packed my chargers. I packed my backup hard drive. I packed the physical notebook where I kept my passwords. I was done arguing. You cannot argue with a parasite. You can only remove it. You cannot reason with a man who sees you as a wallet with a pulse. If I tried to explain to him why this was wrong, he would just gaslight me. He would call me dramatic. He would tell me I was betraying the family. He would twist the knife until I apologized for bleeding on his shirt. So I wouldn't give him the chance. I picked up my phone and took a screenshot of the "Don't be selfish" text from 2 years ago. I took a screenshot of the "You fix mistakes" text from 4 years ago. I added them to the folder. I wasn't just building a case for fraud. I was building a case for character. If this ever went to court, if this ever went to a public inquiry, I wanted the world to see that this wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. This was a systematic campaign of financial abuse. I would not call him. I would not scream at him. I would not give him the satisfaction of hearing my voice crack. I would let the documents speak for me. Documents don't cry. Documents don't feel guilt. Documents just state the facts. I zipped the suitcase shut. The sound was loud in the quiet room, like a zipper on a body bag. I was ready to leave, not just the apartment, but the role. I was resigning from the position of the good girl. I checked the time. It was late afternoon. The sun was dipping below the skyline, casting long shadows across the floor. I had one more night here, one more night to pretend I was scared. I sat down at my desk and pulled a fresh sheet of paper from my printer. I picked up a pen. I wrote down the timeline of every time I had given them money in the last 5 years. The car, the camera, the rent, the bail. The total at the bottom of the page was $32,400. And that was just the money I could remember. I stared at the number. That was a down payment on a house. That was a year of travel. That was my freedom, handed over in installments to buy their approval. I ripped the paper out of the notebook and folded it into a small, sharp square. I put it in my wallet, right next to my credit card. I wasn't taking it as evidence. I was taking it as a reminder. If I ever felt my resolve waver, if I ever felt that old familiar tug of guilt when Dale played the family card, I would look at that number. I would remember that I had already paid my dues. I was paid in full. Now, it was their turn to pay. I grabbed my phone and prepared to send the bait message. The one that would set the hook. I channeled every ounce of that simmering resentment, every good girl I had ever swallowed, and I let it turn into ice. I was done being the daughter. Tomorrow, I would be the compliance officer, and compliance officers do not forgive. We audit. The screen of my laptop hummed with a low, steady energy, the only sound in an apartment that suddenly felt like a waiting room. I had closed the banking tabs. I had closed the evidence folders. Now, I opened a bookmark I had saved 6 months ago and ignored with the determination of a monk ignoring a vice. It was the Marston Ridge Internal Human Resources portal, specifically, the Global Mobility and Talent Exchange page. There, sitting in the pending actions queue, was an offer letter. Position, Regional Director of Compliance Strategy. Location, London, United Kingdom. Status, awaiting candidate response. I had looked at this offer every week since it arrived. It was a massive promotion. It came with a 30% salary increase, a full relocation package, and a housing stipend for the first year. It was the kind of career leap most people in my industry would kill for. It was the golden ticket, and I had let it sit there. I stared at the screen, remembering exactly why I had hesitated. I remembered the heavy, suffocating guilt that had washed over me when I first read it. I can't move to London. I had told myself, who will help Mom with her medical appointments? Who will help Dad navigate his tax audits? Who will make sure Harper doesn't accidentally set her life on fire? I had convinced myself that my physical proximity was the only thing keeping the Powell family infrastructure from collapsing. I believed that leaving them would be an act of abandonment. I believed that a good daughter stays within driving distance of the disaster radius. But as I sat there, with the threat of a $48,000 extortion scheme glowing on my phone, the truth finally broke through the fog. I hadn't been staying to protect them. I had been staying to enable them. My presence didn't make them safer. It just made me available. It made me the path of least resistance. Because I was here, because I was reachable, because I was capable. They never had to learn how to survive on their own. I wasn't their safety net. I was their cushion. And because I was always there to catch them, they never bothered to look down before they jumped. If I stayed, this would never end. If I fixed this condo mess, there would be another one in 6 months. A car, a lawsuit, a gambling debt, as long as I was within reach. Dale would reach for me. The realization was not sad. It was clinical. It was like diagnosing a structural failure in a bridge. You do not cry over the bridge. You close it before it collapses. I moved my cursor to the bottom of the page. The button was green. Accept offer. I didn't call my manager. I didn't write a pros and cons list. I didn't pace around the room wringing my hands. I simply aligned the white arrow with the green rectangle and clicked. The screen refreshed. A banner appeared across the top. Congratulations. Your transfer has been initiated. A mobility consultant will contact you within 24 hours. It was done. No speeches, no tears. Just a database update that shifted my center of gravity 4,000 miles to the east. I felt a sudden, massive release of pressure in my chest. As if a belt that had been tightened for 10 years was suddenly cut. I didn't stop there. The job was the destination, but I needed the vehicle. I opened a new tab and navigated to an airline website. I didn't look for flights next month. I didn't look for flights next week. I looked for flights departing tomorrow night. There was a red-eye leaving at 10:30 in the evening. Direct to Heathrow. I selected a seat in the business cabin. I entered my personal credit card details. The card Dale didn't know about. The one from a bank he didn't bank with. I reviewed the details. One way. The words looked stark on the screen. One way. It wasn't a trip. It was a migration. I hovered over the purchase button. A specific kind of fear tried to creep in. The primal fear of leaving the tribe. It whispered that I was being rash, that I was burning bridges. But then I looked at the folder on my desktop named Case File 001, and the fear evaporated. The bridge was already on fire. I was just choosing not to stand on it while it burned. I clicked Confirm. The ticket was issued. A confirmation email landed in my inbox with a soft ping. I was leaving. In less than 36 hours, I would be in the air, physically removing myself from the jurisdiction of Dale Powell's emotional court. I closed the laptop. The digital administrative work was done. Now came the physical purge. I stood up and walked into the living room. My apartment was tasteful, filled with things I had bought to make a home for myself. But as I looked around, I realized how much of it was just scenery. I went to the closet and pulled out 3 large boxes. I didn't label them storage. I labeled them donate and trash. I moved through the apartment with the efficiency of a liquidator. I didn't pack like someone going on a vacation. I didn't pack outfits for specific events. I packed survival gear for a new life. Into the suitcase went my documents: birth certificate, social security card, university degrees, tax records, the hard copies of my life. Into the suitcase went my jewelry. Not the costume stuff, but the few pieces of real value I had bought for myself as investment pieces. Into the suitcase went my laptop, my chargers, my external hard drives. Then I came to the sentimental items. The shelves were full of them. A framed photo of the family at a beach house 10 years ago. A clay pot Harper had made in high school. A watch Dale had given me for my 25th birthday. A watch I later found out he had bought with money he borrowed from my mother's savings. I picked up the photo. We all looked happy. The sun was shining. But now, looking at it through the lens of the last 4 hours, I saw the tension in my mother's shoulders. I saw the way Dale was standing slightly in front of everyone else. I saw the shadows. I didn't feel a pang of loss. I felt the heavy drag of an anchor. I dropped the photo into the trash bag. The glass cracked as it hit the bottom. I picked up the clay pot. Trash. I picked up the watch. I hesitated for a second, then dropped it in the donate box. Let someone else get some value out of it. It had bought enough guilt for one lifetime. I stripped the apartment of my personality. I left the furniture. I left the kitchenware. I left the books I had already read. I wanted to travel light. I wanted to land in London with nothing but my skills and my name. By the time I was finished, the suitcase was full, the carry-on was packed, and the apartment looked like a hotel room where the guest had already checked out. It was sterile. It was impersonal. It was perfect. I sat down at the bare dining table. I reached into my bag and pulled out a fresh, unopened moleskin notebook. It was black, rigid, and smelled of new paper. I opened it to the first page. I uncapped my pen. I didn't write a diary entry. I didn't write a letter to my family explaining my feelings. I wrote a battle plan. Phase 1. Extraction. Step 1. Secure physical assets. Done. Step 2. Secure digital perimeter. Step 3. Initiate identity fraud protocols. I began to list the tasks I needed to complete before I boarded that plane. Notify building management of lease termination. I would pay the penalty fee. It was worth it. Freeze credit reports at all 3 bureaus. Change beneficiary designations on life insurance and retirement accounts. Currently, Harper was the primary beneficiary. I drew a thick line through her name on the paper and wrote, estate next to it. Draft power of attorney revocation. Dale had a limited power of attorney from 5 years ago when I was in the hospital for surgery. I had never formally revoked it. That was a vulnerability. I made a star next to that item. I wrote down the names of the people I needed to contact, my lawyer, the fraud department at the bank, the HR representative in London. I was creating a structure for the chaos. I was turning a family tragedy into a project management exercise. This is how I cope. This is how I win. I do not drown in feelings. I build a raft out of logic. My phone buzzed on the table. The sound was loud in the empty room. I didn't jump. I finished writing the sentence I was on. Enable global roaming on primary device. And then capped my pen. I looked at the screen. It was Dale. Again. If you run, you look guilty. I stared at the message. The timestamp was 9:42 in the evening. He was escalating. He wasn't getting the panic response he wanted. He wasn't getting the sobbing phone call or the immediate transfer of funds. So now he was trying to play mind games. If you run, you look guilty. He was trying to pin me in place. He wanted me to stay still so he could aim. He was using the oldest trick in the predator's handbook. Convince the prey that movement is dangerous. Convince the prey that freezing is the only safe option. But he had made a critical error. By telling me that running made me look guilty. He had revealed his hand. He was watching for flight. He was anticipating it. He was terrified that I would simply disappear and leave him holding the bag with the bank. He needed me to be present to take the fall. If I wasn't there to sign the papers, if I wasn't there to be bullied into submission, his entire plan fell apart. I didn't feel fear. I felt a slow, cold smile spread across my face. It wasn't a smile of happiness. It was the smile of a chess player who watches their opponent move their queen into a line of fire. He thought running meant disappearing. He thought running meant hiding. He didn't understand that I wasn't running away from the fight. I was moving to the high ground, and his text gave me an idea. A brilliant, dangerous idea. If he was watching for me to run, if he was expecting me to act like a guilty woman trying to escape, then I should give him exactly what he expected. I should let him think he was right. I should let him think I was panicking. I should let him think I was fleeing the country to avoid the consequences. Because if he thought I was running away out of fear, he would get sloppy. He would get arrogant. He would think he had won. And when a man like Dale Powell thinks he has won, he drops his guard. He was watching me like a hawk. Fine, I would give him something to see. I looked at the one-way ticket confirmation on my laptop screen, the real one, the one that would take me to freedom. Then I looked at the phone. You want me to look guilty, Dad? I whispered to the glowing screen. Okay, I can play guilty. I picked up the pen again, on the next page of the notebook. I wrote a new heading, Phase 2, the decoy. I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to leave a trail of breadcrumbs that led him straight into a concrete wall. I was going to use his own assumption against him. He expected me to run? I would run, but I would run in a direction he could follow. To a destination I would never reach, setting a trap he would never see coming. I closed the notebook. The plan was no longer just about escape. It was about engagement. I checked my watch. I had 12 hours before the deadline. Plenty of time to set the stage. Plenty of time to buy another ticket. A fake one. Plenty of time to break his heart the way he had broken my trust. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Dale was probably sitting in his armchair, holding his phone, thinking he had me cornered. He had no idea that the woman he was threatening was already gone. All that was left was the architect of his ruin. I sat in the glow of my laptop screen, the cursor blinking on the airline's checkout page. This was not the confirmation page for my flight to London. This was a separate window, a separate airline, and a separate lie. I selected a one-way ticket from our local international airport to Cancun, Mexico. I chose Cancun not because I wanted a vacation, but because it is the cliché destination for Americans who are running away from something. It screams panic. It screams impulsivity. It screams guilt. I selected the fully refundable fare class. It cost $600 more than the standard economy seat. But I wasn't paying for a seat. I was paying for a prop. I entered my credit card information, the same card I had just used for my real escape, and clicked Purchase. The confirmation appeared on the screen. Flight DL492 departs tomorrow, 10:45 p.m. I took a screenshot. I cropped it carefully so the refundable tag was cut off, leaving only the destination, the time, and my name. Now came the performance. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over the message thread with Dale. The last message from him, "If you run, you look guilty," was still sitting there, a taunt that he thought was a cage. He didn't realize it was actually a key. I needed to sound small. I needed to sound like the daughter he had spent 30 years molding, the one who crumpled under pressure, the one who feared authority more than she feared unfairness. I needed to act like the Stella of yesterday so that the Stella of tomorrow could survive. I typed the words slowly, testing them on my tongue. "You win. I am leaving tonight. I cannot risk my license. Please just stop." I read it back. It was pathetic. It was perfect. I attached the screenshot of the Cancun flight ticket. I hit send. I placed the phone face down on the table and waited. I counted the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. I didn't even get to 10. The phone buzzed. It was a violent, eager vibration. He had been watching his screen. He had been waiting for the break. I flipped it over. "Smart girl. You're making the right choice. We will handle the rest." I felt a surge of bile rise in my throat, hot and acidic. Smart girl. It was a variation of good girl. It was the praise he offered when I aligned my life with his convenience. He didn't ask why I was going to Mexico. He didn't ask how long I would be gone. He didn't ask if I was scared. He just validated the submission. He saw the flight ticket not as a tragedy, but as a victory. I was fleeing, which meant I wasn't fighting. But now I had to land the hook. The flight was just the distraction. The money was the bait. I knew exactly what he was thinking right now. He was thinking that since I had agreed to run, I had also agreed to pay. In his mind, the two were linked. If I was taking the blame, I was also covering the cost. He was probably already opening his banking app, expecting to see a wire transfer notification. I needed to get ahead of that. I needed to control the mechanics of the transfer, because if I simply wired the money, which I had no intention of doing, or if I simply told him I won't pay, which would restart the war, the trap would fail. I needed to offer him the money in a way that forced them to walk into a bank branch and commit a felony on camera. I started typing again. This was the most dangerous part of the lie. It had to be technical enough to sound real, but simple enough for him to understand. Dale knows nothing about banking compliance, but he thinks he knows everything. I had to use jargon that would make him nod his head and say, "Ah, yes, bureaucracy." I tried to wire the 48,000 just now. I typed, but the system flagged it. Because of the investigation alerts on my employee profile, I cannot move more than $5,000 a day electronically without a manager override. I paused. It was a plausible lie. Employee accounts are monitored. He would believe that. I don't want to trigger a manual review. I continued. If a human looks at it, they might see the condo documents. I was feeding his paranoia. I was aligning myself with him. Us against the bank. Us against the auditors. Then, the solution. I used my admin privileges to add Harper as an authorized signer on the account instead. It is the only way around the wire limit. I sent it. I waited. This was the gamble. If he asked for a screenshot of the authorization, I would have to fake one quickly. If he asked why I couldn't just write a check, I would have to invent another rule. The response came 30 seconds later. So she can access it? Greed. Pure, unfiltered greed. He didn't care about the flags. He didn't care about the risk to me. He just wanted to know if the tap was open. Yes, I replied. But she has to do it in person. The system requires biometric verification for a new signer making a large withdrawal. She needs to go to the branch, show her ID, and sign the withdrawal slip for a cashier's check. I was layering the protocols. In person, show ID, sign the slip. These are the three things a fraudster tries to avoid. Fraudsters like anonymity. They like the dark. They like transfers that happen in the cloud. By forcing Harper to go into a physical branch, I was ensuring there would be high-definition video footage of her face, a physical signature on a withdrawal slip, and a scan of her driver's license in the teller system at the exact moment of the theft. I added the final instruction, the one that would ensure they went to the specific location where I had already alerted the security team. Go to the Main Street branch. The manager there is new and doesn't know me. If she goes to the one near your house, they might ask questions about where I am. Do not go to the drive-thru. Walk inside. I hit send. I held my breath. I was guiding them into the cage, closing the door, and handing them the lock. Dale's reply was almost instantaneous. Done. She will be there at 9 a.m. sharp. Make sure the funds are clear. Make sure the funds are clear. He was giving me orders again, even in the middle of my supposed breakdown, even as I was allegedly fleeing the country to save my career from a mess he created. He was still the manager. He was still the CEO of Powell Family Dysfunction, issuing directives to his subordinates. He didn't say thank you. He didn't say, I'm sorry it came to this. He didn't say, be safe in Mexico. Just make sure the funds are clear. He accepted the lie completely. He accepted it because it was what he wanted to happen. He wanted the money. He wanted the problem to go away, and he wanted to believe that he had successfully intimidated me into solving it for him. Confirmation bias is a powerful drug, and Dale was overdosing on it. He thought he had won. He thought he had outsmarted the compliance officer. He thought that by threatening my job, he had forced me to break the rules for him. He didn't realize that I was following the rules perfectly. The rules say that when you detect fraud, you collect evidence, and the best evidence is a confession. By agreeing to send Harper to the bank to withdraw money from an account she had no legal right to access, an account I had never actually authorized her on, he was conspiring to commit bank fraud, and by sending her in with her own ID, he was sending her to document the crime. I typed one last response. I wanted to end the conversation on a note of total submission. I wanted him to sleep soundly tonight. I wanted him to wake up tomorrow morning feeling invincible. I understand. I wrote, the money is there. I am boarding now. I am turning my phone off. Good luck with the condo. Good luck. The irony tasted metallic in my mouth. Go, he replied. We have got this. I stared at the screen for a long moment. We have got this. It was the most honest thing he had said all day. They did have it. They had the plan. And they were busy building the trap they were about to step into, confident and smiling. I set the phone down on the table. The screen went black. The apartment was silent. The air conditioner hummed. Outside, the city traffic was a distant murmur. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't guilt. I searched for guilt, checking my emotional pockets like I was looking for keys. But it wasn't there. For the first time in my life, the guilt was gone. Instead, I felt a cold, sharp clarity. I had lied to my father. I had manipulated my sister. I had set a trap that would likely end in handcuffs. But I hadn't done it to hurt them. I had done it to stop them. For years. I had tried to stop them with logic. I had tried to stop them with boundaries. I had tried to stop them with love. None of it had worked. They had bulldozed through every fence I had ever built. So now, I was building a wall out of consequences. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked at the reflection of the room behind me, the packed boxes, the empty shelves, the suitcase standing by the door. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, Harper would walk into that bank branch. She would be wearing her best outfit, thinking she was picking up a paycheck she hadn't earned. Dale would probably be waiting in the car, or maybe he would pace the lobby, impatient for the victory lap. They would approach the teller. Harper would slide her ID across the counter. She would ask for $48,000 from Stella Powell's account, and the teller, who would have a red flag popping up on her screen the moment she typed in my account number, would smile that polite, terrifying customer service smile. She would say, "One moment, please." She would step away to get a manager, and the trap would snap shut. I turned away from the window. I had a real flight to catch, not to Mexico, but to London. Not to run away, but to ascend. I picked up my phone one last time, not to text Dale, but to power it down. I held the side button. The screen verified the shutdown. Power off. I watched the light fade. Let them celebrate tonight. Let them toast to their cleverness. Let them spend the money in their heads. Confidence makes people sloppy. Arrogance makes them blind. Dale thought he was playing poker. He thought he held all the aces. He didn't realize we weren't playing cards anymore. We were playing distinct versions of reality. And in my version, the receipts were the only things that mattered. I grabbed the handle of my suitcase. It felt solid. It felt heavy. It felt like the only thing in the world that truly belonged to me. I walked to the door, opened it, and stepped out into the hallway. I locked the door behind me. I didn't look back. The bait was taken. The line was tight. All that was left to do was wait for the reel. The airport lounge was quiet, a vacuum-sealed chamber of soft lighting and the hushed clicks of laptop keyboards. I found a corner seat away from the window, pulled my laptop from my bag, and connected to the secure Wi-Fi. The time for emotion was over, the time for theatrics, the fake ticket, the scared daughter texts was over. Now, I was back in my lane. I was a senior compliance specialist, and I was about to file the most meticulous fraud report of my career. I did not call a friend. I did not call a favor. In my line of work, shortcuts are the enemy of admissibility. If I wanted this to stick, if I wanted to protect myself from the inevitable backlash when Dale realized the money wasn't coming, I had to follow the procedure to the letter. I logged into the external reporting portal for the bank holding the compromised account. I didn't use my employee credentials this time. I used the public-facing fraud reporting tool, just like any other victim would. This was crucial. It established me as a customer reporting a crime, not an insider manipulating the system. Incident type: identity theft / unauthorized access. Priority level: critical. I began to upload the evidence. I attached the folder, project-blue-glass. I uploaded the timeline I had created, documenting every unauthorized login, every IP address match, and every failed security question. I uploaded the screenshot of the forged letter of explanation with the formatting errors I had identified. Then, I added the crown jewel, the text messages. I uploaded the screenshot of Dale's ultimatum: pay $48,000 by noon tomorrow, or I report you. I uploaded the screenshot of his confirmation: make sure the funds are clear. I uploaded the screenshot of my instructions to them about going to the branch, annotated with a note: Suspects have been advised to attempt in-person withdrawal to facilitate identification. In the narrative section of the report, I wrote with the dry, sterile precision of a coroner. I, Stella Powell, am reporting a coordinated attempt to defraud my account through unauthorized identity usage and extortion. The suspects, identified as Dale Powell and Harper Powell, have accessed my online banking profile using personal knowledge to bypass security questions. They have forged my signature on loan documents for a third-party real estate transaction. Upon confronting me with a demand for funds to cover this fraudulent loan, they threatened to report me for professional misconduct if I did not comply. I have reason to believe they will attempt to access the funds in person at the Main Street branch tomorrow morning at opening. I hit submit. The system generated a case number, FR-2-9-4-0-1. I wrote the number down in my black moleskin notebook. That number was my shield. Next, I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the bank's Regional Fraud Operations Center. It was late, but the fraud desk never sleeps. Fraud Operations, this is Marcus. Hello, Marcus. My name is Stella Powell. I've just filed a critical incident report, case number FR-2-9-4-0-1. I am a compliance officer at Marston Ridge Financial, so I am familiar with the protocol. I need to speak with the branch operations lead for the Main Street location immediately regarding a high-risk interaction expected tomorrow morning. There was a pause, the sound of typing, and then Marcus's tone shifted from rote to alert. I see the report. Ms. Powell, the evidence file is extensive. I do this for a living, I said simply. The suspects believe they have been authorized to withdraw $48,000 via a manager override. They will attempt to impersonate an authorized signer. I need the account flagged for code red identity verification. No funds are to be released. Understood, Marcus said. I'm patching in Sarah Jenkins. She's the area manager for that district. Hold one moment. The line clicked. A moment later, a woman's voice came on. Ms. Powell, this is Sarah Jenkins. I'm looking at your file. This is family? Yes, I said. But for the purposes of this call, they are unauthorized actors attempting to access secured funds. Of course, Sarah said, her voice professional but tight. What is your request? I am requesting a monitored interaction, I said. When Harper Powell presents herself at the counter, I do not want her turned away immediately. I want the teller to initiate the standard identity verification protocol. I want the ID scanned. I want the withdrawal slip signed. I want the camera to capture the transaction attempt. Once the attempt is documented, I want the transaction declined for insufficient authorization and security to be notified. You want us to stall, Sarah clarified. I want you to follow the law, I corrected. If someone tries to withdraw $48,000 from an account they are not on, that is attempted grand larceny. I want the bank to treat it as such. Keep it calm, keep it legal, but do not let them leave thinking it was a technical glitch. Make sure the denial is recorded. We can do that, Sarah said. I'll brief the branch manager first thing in the morning. We'll have security on standby in the lobby, just in case it escalates. You mentioned the father might be present? He will likely be there, I said. He is the architect. He may attempt to intimidate the staff. He may claim to have me on the phone or claim to have special permission. Please advise your team not to engage if he becomes aggressive. Follow standard escalation to law enforcement. Understood. The account is locked. Notes are added. We're ready for them. Thank you. Sarah. I hung up. The trap was set. It wasn't a trap of malice. It was a trap of compliance. All I had done was ensure that the rules would be applied. If Harper and Dale were innocent, the rules wouldn't hurt them. But they weren't innocent. They were walking into a buzzsaw of regulations they didn't even know existed. My phone buzzed again. It was an email from my attorney. David. Subject: Contingency Plan. Draft V1. I opened it. David was a pit bull in a suit. A man I had hired 3 years ago to handle a complex contract dispute. I had briefed him an hour ago. The email contained a draft of a cease and desist letter and a notice of representation. Stella. The email read, "I've prepared the packet. If Dale attempts to file a police report against you for reneging on the loan, or if he contacts your employer with false allegations, we will file this immediately. It includes the extortion evidence and the fraud log. It also puts him on notice that any further contact will be considered harassment. You are covered." I read the documents. They were brutal in their clarity. They stripped away the family drama narrative and presented the facts. Client was coerced under threat of professional defamation to assume liability for a debt she did not incur. I replied, "Looks good. Keep it in the chamber. I hope we don't need it. But I know we will." I closed the laptop. The procedural net was tightened. Every exit was blocked. Every contingency was covered. I checked the departure board. My flight to London was boarding in 40 minutes. This timing was not accidental. By the time the bank opened tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, I would be somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean. 30,000 feet in the air. Completely unreachable. Distance was a strategic asset. If I were still in the city, Dale might try to come to my apartment when the transaction failed. He might try to pound on my door, scream through the wood, force a confrontation. He might try to physically intimidate me into calling the bank, but he couldn't intimidate a ghost. By being physically absent, I removed myself as a variable. He couldn't pressure me. He couldn't guilt me. He couldn't threaten me. He would be left shouting at a void. While the bank staff, people he couldn't bully, people who were just doing their jobs, held the line. I walked to the window of the lounge and looked out at the tarmac. The planes were lined up like dark, sleeping beasts, their red navigation lights blinking in the darkness. I thought about the last text I had sent him. "We have got this." He had no idea what this was. He thought it was a conspiracy to defraud a bank. He didn't realize it was a conspiracy to uphold the law. I pulled out my phone one last time before powering it down for the flight. I opened the folder one last time. I looked at the screenshot of the ultimatum. "Pay $48,000 by noon tomorrow, or I report you." I tapped the edit button. I added a text box over the image, in red capital letters, "Extortion timestamp, Saturday, 10:42 a.m. I saved it. I felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't happiness. You can't be happy when you're dismantling your own family. But it was the peace of alignment. For years, my life had been misaligned. I had been a compliance officer who allowed non-compliance in her own home. I had been a fraud detector who let her own father commit moral fraud against her daily. Now, the two halves of my life were finally integrated. The daughter and the professional were one and the same, and neither of them was going to be a victim anymore. Flight BA 178 to London Heathrow is now inviting passengers in Group 1 to board. The intercom announced. I stood up. I slung my laptop bag over my shoulder. I picked up my carry-on. I didn't look back at the empty seat. I didn't look back at the city skyline. I walked toward the gate, my steps echoing on the polished floor. I was walking away from the noise. I was walking away from the chaos. And for the first time in 35 years, I wasn't walking toward a problem I had to fix. I was walking toward a life I had chosen. The net was tight. The stage was set. The players were in position. All that was left was for the curtain to rise. I was 35,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean, somewhere between the coast of Nova Scotia and the darkness of the open sea. The cabin of the British Airways flight was dim, most of the passengers asleep under thin blankets, but I was wide awake. The small light above my seat was the only illumination as I stared at my laptop screen. I had purchased the high-speed Wi-Fi package for $30. It was a small price to pay for a front-row seat to my own vindication. I was not physically in the branch on Main Street. I was 4 time zones away, but thanks to the meticulous coordination with Sarah Jenkins and the automated alert system I had configured, I could see the timeline unfolding in a series of time-stamped secure emails and system logs that populated my inbox like a digital ticker tape. 9 o'clock in the morning, the branch doors unlocked. I could imagine the rush of cool air conditioning meeting the humid morning heat. I opened the first log entry from the bank's internal security system, which Sarah was forwarding to me as part of the monitored interaction protocol. Subject: Perimeter breach/suspect entry. Time: 9:03 a. Notes: Female subject matching description of Harper Powell entered lobby. Approached teller station 3. I closed my eyes and I could see her. I knew exactly what Harper was wearing. She would have raided the back of her closet for the business clothes she hadn't touched since her last failed interview. She would be wearing the navy blue blazer I bought her for her 25th birthday. The one she said was too stiff, but kept because it had a designer label. She would have straightened her hair. She would be wearing large sunglasses, pushing them up onto her head with a practiced casualness. She would be walking with that specific, bouncy stride she used when she was trying to convince the world she was important. She walked up to the counter. She didn't wait in line. Harper never waits in line if she thinks she has an appointment with destiny. She placed her purse on the counter, probably my old Michael Kors bag she had borrowed last Christmas, and smiled at the teller. It was the smile she used on landlords when the rent was late. The smile she used on police officers when she was speeding. It was a weaponized smile, dazzling and entirely hollow. "Hi," she would say. "I am here to make a withdrawal. My sister, Stella Powell, added me to the account yesterday." She slid her driver's license across the polished granite. Log update. Identity verification initiated. Time: 9:05 a.m. Status: hard flag. Code red. The moment the teller typed Harper's name or scanned the barcode on the back of her license, the screen on the other side of the counter would have flashed. It wouldn't be a subtle notification. It would be a full-screen block. Fraud suspect. Do not dispense funds. Contact security. I knew the teller at Station 3. Her name was Linda. She was a woman in her 50s who had seen everything from armed robbery attempts to confused seniors losing their pensions to scams. Linda would not panic. She would blink once, her face remaining perfectly neutral. She would tap a silent key under the desk, the one that alerts the branch manager and the remote security monitoring center. "One moment. Ms. Powell," Linda would say. "The system is running a little slow this morning. I just need to get a supervisor override for the amount." It was the oldest line in the book, and it worked every time. Harper, who had never worked a day in a bank in her life, nodded. "Okay, but please hurry. I have a contractor waiting." A lie. There was no contractor. There was only Dale, sitting in his sedan in the parking lot, tapping the steering wheel, waiting for his money. Log update. Subject behavior. Agitation. Time: 9:08 a.m. 3 minutes is a long time to stand at a bank counter when you are committing a felony. The silence stretches. The air feels thinner. I could see Harper shifting her weight from one foot to the other. She would be looking around the lobby, checking to see if anyone was watching her. She would check her phone. She texted Dale. I knew she did, because I had the transcript of the metadata later. "Harper, it is taking forever. The lady went to get a manager. She was starting to crack. Harper operates on momentum. If you stop her, if you force her to think, the panic sets in. She wasn't built for the siege. She was built for the smash and grab." Log update. Second suspect entry. Time: 9 to 10 a.m. Notes. Male subject, identified as Dale Powell, entered lobby, aggressive posture. I smiled a cold, humorless smile in the dim cabin of the plane. Dale couldn't help himself. He couldn't stay in the car. He had to supervise. He had to be the big man. He saw Harper standing there, looking nervous, and his ego demanded that he intervene. He walked into that bank not as a criminal, but as a dissatisfied customer. He marched up to the teller station, flanking Harper. He placed a heavy hand on the counter, invading Linda's personal space. "What is the holdup?" he demanded. His voice would be loud, designed to embarrass the staff into compliance. "My daughter has been standing here for 5 minutes. We were told this was authorized." Linda returned to the window. She was joined by the branch manager, a man named Robert, who I had met once at a holiday mixer. Robert was tall, calm, and terrifyingly polite. Good morning, sir, Robert said. We are just verifying the authorization. It is a large sum, and the primary account holder is not present. The primary account holder is on a plane, Dale snapped. She sent the authorization last night. I saw the text myself. Are you calling my daughter a liar? He was doing exactly what I predicted. He was trying to bully the regulations. He was using volume as a substitute for validity. He thought that if he yelled loud enough, the bank would simply hand over $48,000 to make him stop. I am not calling anyone a liar, sir, Robert said, his voice level. I am following federal identity protocols. We need to verify that Ms. Stella Powell actually initiated this request. We have a flag on the account that requires verbal confirmation. She is in the air, Dale shouted. She can't answer the phone. That is why she sent Harper. He was digging the hole deeper. He was admitting that they knew I was unreachable. He was admitting that they were trying to bypass the check. Log update. Security protocol activated. Time, 9:12 a.m. Action. Silent alarm to local law enforcement. Lobby exits monitored. The security guard, a burly man who usually spent his mornings nodding at customers, moved from the door to the center of the room. He didn't draw a weapon. He didn't yell. He just stood there, arms crossed, blocking the easy path to the exit. Harper noticed him. I could picture the blood draining from her face. The rich girl cosplay was falling apart. She wasn't the confident heiress anymore. She was the little sister who got caught stealing cookies. Only this time, the cookie jar was a federal vault. "Dad," she whispered. I could almost hear the tremor in her voice. "Dad, let's just go. We can come back later." "We are not going anywhere," Dale hissed. He turned back to Robert. "I want that money released now, or I am moving every account I have to Chase." Robert didn't blink. He knew Dale didn't have any accounts to move. He knew Dale was bluffing with an empty hand. "Sir, I need you to lower your voice," Robert said. "We are attempting to assist you." "You are not assisting me. You are stalling." Dale slammed his hand on the counter. The sound echoed through the high ceilings of the branch. Other customers stopped their transactions and turned to look. This was the moment. This was the receipt I had been waiting for. Robert looked down at the screen. He typed a few keys. Then he looked up, his eyes locking onto Harper. "Ms. Powell," Robert said. "To proceed, I need you to sign this withdrawal affidavit. It states that you are acting with the explicit current consent of the account holder, and that you understand that falsely claiming authorization is a federal crime punishable by up to 30 years in prison." He slid a piece of paper across the counter. It was a standard form, but Robert made it sound like a death warrant. Harper stared at the paper. Her hand shook. She looked at the pen. She looked at Dale. Dale nudged her, a hard, physical shove with his elbow. "Sign it," he muttered. "Stella said it's fine. Sign the damn paper." Harper picked up the pen. She touched the tip to the paper, and then she stopped. The pressure was too much. The security guard was watching. The manager was watching. The cameras were zooming in. The weight of the lie was crushing her. She looked at the paper, and the reality of what she was doing finally pierced the delusion Dale had spun for her. "I can't," she whispered. "Sign it," Dale barked. "I can't." Harper dropped the pen. It clattered against the granite. Her voice rose to a hysterical pitch. "She didn't sign the letter." "Dad, you did. You signed it." The silence in the bank was absolute. Dale froze. His face went from red to a pale, sickly gray. He turned to look at Harper, his eyes wide with betrayal. She had just confessed. She had just implicated him. But Harper wasn't done. She was panicking. And when Harper panics, she vomits the truth. She looked at Robert, her eyes filling with tears. "I didn't want to do it," she sobbed. "My dad said she already agreed. He said she was leaving the country because she was guilty, so the money was ours anyway." My dad said she already agreed. There it was, the spoken admission, captured on high-definition video, witnessed by a branch manager, 3 tellers, and a lobby full of customers. She had admitted that she knew I hadn't signed the paperwork. She had admitted that Dale was the mastermind. She had admitted that they were operating on the assumption that I was a fugitive. Robert didn't smile. He didn't look triumphant. He just reached out and pulled the withdrawal slip back behind the counter. "Thank you, Ms. Powell," Robert said quietly. "That is all the information we need. Log update. Incident escalation. Time, 9:15 a.m. Action. Police units arrival on scene. Through the glass front of the bank, the flashing blue lights of the patrol cars reflected off the polished floors. Dale spun around. He saw the officers approaching the door. For a second, I imagined he looked for a way out. He looked at the back exit, but the security guard took a step forward. He looked at the side door, but it was locked. He was trapped in the cage he had built for me. I sat back in my seat on the plane. The engine noise was a steady hum, a lullaby of distance and safety. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel a thrill. I felt a profound, exhausting relief. The text from Sarah Jenkins arrived a moment later. Subject: Incident report, update. Message: attempted withdrawal declined. Suspects detained by local PD for questioning. Statements obtained. Full video package secure. I closed the laptop. I didn't need to see the arrest. I didn't need to see Dale being handcuffed, blustering about his rights. I didn't need to see Harper crying, realizing that her creative life had just run into a very literal wall. I knew how the script ended. I had written it. I ordered a glass of champagne from the flight attendant. "Celebrating something?" she asked, as she placed the flute on my tray table. I looked at the bubbles rising to the surface, frantic and energetic, disappearing into the air. "Yes," I said. "I just paid off a very old debt." I took a sip. It tasted like cold, crisp iron. Below me, the ocean was dark and vast. Behind me, in a small branch on Main Street, my family was explaining themselves to officers who didn't care about their small emergencies. The bank scene was over. The credits were rolling on their performance. But for me, the movie was just starting. The flight attendant cleared my champagne flute. Leaving me alone with the glowing screen of my laptop, I wasn't watching a movie. I was watching the end of a lifestyle, thanks to the subpoena my lawyer, David, would later file, and the incident report provided by the bank's security team. I know exactly what happened in that lobby after the silent alarm tripped. I have watched the security footage enough times to memorize the time codes. I have read the transcripts until the voices play in my head like a radio drama. It was 9:15 in the morning when the automatic glass doors slid open to admit 2 uniformed officers from the local precinct. They didn't rush in with guns drawn. They walked in with the heavy board gait of men who spend their days dealing with false alarms and petty disputes. They saw a well-dressed woman crying at the counter and a man in a polo shirt yelling at a branch manager. To them, it looked like a domestic disturbance, not a federal crime. But Harper changed that dynamic in seconds. As soon as she saw the uniforms, the last shred of her composure evaporated. Harper has never been good with consequences. Her entire life strategy relies on the assumption that if she cries pretty enough, the rules will bend. She turned toward the officers, mascara streaking down her cheeks, pointing a manicured finger at the empty space where I should have been. "She set me up!" Harper screamed. Her voice cracked, high and thin. "My sister, Stella Powell. She told me to come here. She said the money was waiting." Officer Miller, the older of the two, approached the counter. He didn't look impressed. He looked at Robert, the manager. "What do we have here?" "Attempted unauthorized withdrawal," Robert said calmly. $48,000. The account holder is not present, and the suspect just admitted on record that she knows the account holder did not sign the release. "I didn't say that," Harper shrieked, pivoting back to the officer. I said she agreed. She sent me a text." "May I see the text, ma'am?" Officer Miller asked. He held out his hand. Harper fumbled for her phone. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She unlocked it, her thumbs flying across the screen, desperate to find the message I had sent. The one where I said, "You win." She needed to prove that I was the architect of this scene, but panic makes people clumsy. Instead of opening the screenshot of the ticket, she opened her messages with Dale. "Here," she sobbed, shoving the phone into the officer's face. "Read it. She said she was leaving. She said she was running away." Officer Miller took the phone. He looked at the screen. He frowned. Then he looked up at Harper, his expression shifting from annoyance to suspicion. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "this text says, 'Tell them she folded. If they ask about the signature, say she has a tremor.'" The air in the lobby seemed to freeze. That wasn't my text. That was a text Dale had sent Harper 5 minutes before they walked into the bank. It was coaching. It was a script. Harper froze. She realized her mistake instantly. She snatched the phone back. But the damage was done. "Why would you need to explain a signature if it was genuine?" Officer Miller asked. His hand moved casually to his belt, resting near his cuffs. "And why do you think the account holder folded?" Harper looked at Dale. She needed him to step in. She needed him to be the father who fixed things. "Dad?" she whimpered. Dale Powell, who had been standing a few feet back, watching the interaction with narrowed eyes, made a calculation. "I know my father. I know how his mind works. He treats relationships like investments. When an asset becomes a liability, you liquidate it." He took a half step away from Harper. He held up his hands, palms open, in a gesture of bewildered innocence. "I have no idea what she is talking about," Dale said. His voice was smooth, steady, and terrifyingly calm. "I told her to wait until Stella called. I told her not to come down here if she wasn't sure. She has a history of getting confused." The silence that followed was louder than a gunshot. Harper stopped crying. She stared at him. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked like a child who had just watched her hero take off a mask to reveal a monster. "Confused?" Harper whispered. "You drove me here. You told me to sign the paper." "I drove you because you asked for a ride," Dale said, shaking his head with a look of paternal disappointment. "I didn't know you were going to try to access the account without permission." "Officer, my daughter has been under a lot of financial stress. I think she just snapped. He was throwing her to the wolves. He was betting everything on the idea that if he distanced himself fast enough, he could walk out of the lobby as a witness rather than a suspect. He was willing to let Harper take the fall for grand larceny to save his own skin. It was the ultimate betrayal, and it was the catalyst for the explosion. Harper didn't just break. She detonated. "You liar!" she screamed. She lunged at him, scratching at his chest before the second officer, Officer Davis, caught her arm and pulled her back. "You told me to do it. You said Stella was a coward. You said she ran away and we had to take what was ours before the bank froze it." "Calm down, ma'am," Officer Davis said, struggling to hold her as she thrashed. "He made me do it," Harper yelled, her voice raw and ugly. "He has the condo papers. He forged her signature. He told me that if I didn't help him get the money, he would tell everyone I was using drugs again. He threatened me." Dale's face turned a violent shade of red. "She is lying. She is hysterical. Officer, arrest her before she hurts someone. He threatened Stella, too." Harper wasn't stopping. She was vomiting every secret the family had kept for years. "He sent her a picture. He told her he would report her to the board if she didn't pay. He said he would ruin her career." Officer Miller looked at Dale. "Is that true, sir? Did you threaten the account holder?" "Absolutely not," Dale scoffed. He adjusted his collar, trying to regain his dignity. "My daughter Stella is a high-level executive. Do you really think I could threaten her? This is ridiculous. Harper is having a breakdown. I tried to help her with a real estate investment, and she messed up the paperwork. Now she's trying to blame everyone else." He turned to the door. "I am going to call our family lawyer. This is a misunderstanding." "Sir, you are not going anywhere," Officer Miller said. He stepped into Dale's path. "We have an allegation of extortion and forgery. Based on what?" Dale sneered. The word of a girl who just tried to rob a bank? It is he, she said. You have no proof. And that was when the phone on the branch manager's desk rang. Robert picked it up. He listened for a moment, then hit the speaker button. Officers, Robert said. I have David Thorne on the line. He is Stella Powell's attorney. He says he has sent a digital evidence packet to your precinct, but he wants to address the he said she said claim immediately. David's voice filled the lobby. It was crisp, authoritative, and laced with the sharp edge of a man who enjoys destroying liars. Good morning, officers, David said. Mr. Powell is claiming that the threats are fabricated. I have just emailed Officer Miller a PDF containing the metadata logs for a text message sent yesterday at 10:42 in the morning. The message reads, Pay $48,000 by noon tomorrow, or I report you. The metadata confirms it originated from a device registered to Dale Powell. IP address, matching his home residence. Dale froze. He looked at the speakerphone as if it were a bomb. That's faked, Dale stammered. Stella works in IT. She could have spoofed it. She hacked my phone. We anticipated that defense, David continued, his voice cutting through Dale's panic. Which is why we also pulled the access logs for the condo application documents. Mr. Powell, did you know that when you created the fake email address to submit the forged loan application, you linked it to your own personal recovery phone number? I watched the color drain from Dale's face on the security tape later. It was instantaneous. It was the look of a man who realizes he didn't just leave a fingerprint. He left a signed confession. The email address, David said, reciting it for the record, is Stella, Powell, finance@gmail.com. It was created 3 weeks ago. Google verification codes were sent to the mobile number ending in 4599. That is your cell phone number. Mr. Powell, unless you are suggesting Stella hacked Google's servers to frame you before the crime even started? Dale opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The Stella is a hacker defense had crumbled before he could even fully build it. He had created that email address to control the loan process, to intercept any warnings the bank sent to me. He thought he was being clever. He thought he was insulating himself. Instead, he had tied himself directly to the fraud. Officer Miller looked at his partner. He nodded. Dale Powell, Officer Miller said, reaching for his handcuffs. Please place your hands behind your back. You can't do this, Dale sputtered. He backed away, bumping into the velvet rope line. I am the victim here. My daughter abandoned us. She owes me this money. After everything I paid for? After everything I did for her? Hands behind your back. Sir, Officer Miller repeated, his voice dropping an octave. Dale looked at Harper. She was standing by the counter, tears streaming down her face. Watching him, she didn't look angry anymore. She looked exhausted. Tell them, Harper, Dale pleaded. Desperation clawed at his voice. Tell them we were just borrowing it. Tell them Stella wouldn't mind. Harper looked at him. She looked at the handcuffs clicking around his wrists. And for the first time in her life, she didn't take the bait. She did mind, Dad, Harper whispered. She minded enough to leave. Officer Davis moved to Harper. Ms. Powell, I'm going to need you to come with us as well. We have to sort this out at the station. I know, Harper said. She held out her hands. She didn't fight. She surrendered with a strange kind of dignity she had never possessed when she was free. The lobby was a flurry of activity. The officers read them their rights. The other customers whispered and pointed. Robert, the manager, began typing up the final incident report. But the most satisfying moment, the twist that I hadn't even written into the script, came right as they were leading Dale out the door. His phone, which Officer Miller was holding in an evidence bag, lit up with a notification. It was loud enough to be heard on the body cam audio. It was an automated alert from the condo developer. Urgent. Financing deadline missed. Unit 4B has been released to the next buyer on the wait list. Dale stopped. He stared at the phone in the clear plastic bag. He had committed extortion. He had committed fraud. He had destroyed his relationship with both of his daughters. He was going to prison, and he had lost the condo anyway. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor as dry as my own. I watched the footage end as the patrol cars pulled away from the curb. The screen went black. I sat there in the dark cabin, the hum of the engines vibrating against my spine. I took a deep breath. It was the first breath I had taken in years that didn't feel like I was borrowing air from someone else. The unraveling was complete. The tangled mess of guilt and obligation and manipulation had been cut through with a single, sharp stroke of truth. I closed the laptop. I put my tray table up. "Ladies and gentlemen," the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "We are beginning our initial descent into London Heathrow. The local time is 7 in the morning, and the weather is cool and clear." I looked out the window. The sky was turning a soft, pale gray. The sun was rising on a different continent. My father was in a holding cell. My sister was in an interrogation room, and I was landing in a city where nobody knew my name, ready to start a job where the only compliance I had to worry about was the law. I smiled. It wasn't a smile of revenge. It was a smile of retirement. I had finally resigned from the family business. The wheels of the aircraft touched down on the tarmac at Heathrow with a heavy, decisive thud that vibrated through the floor of the cabin. It was the sound of contact, of arrival, of a physical transition from one life to another. I turned on my phone as the plane taxied toward the gate. I expected a flood of missed calls from my relatives. I expected angry texts from aunts and cousins who had been spun a sob story by Dale about how I had abandoned the family in their hour of need. But the phone remained strangely silent of family noise. Instead, it lit up with a single, high-priority incoming call from a number I recognized immediately. It was Sarah Jenkins, the regional fraud operations lead, who had coordinated the trap at the bank branch back home. I answered on the first ring, pressing the phone tight against my ear to hear over the roar of the reverse thrusters. "Stella Powell speaking," I said. "Stella, are you on the ground?" Sarah's voice was brisk, stripped of the polite customer service veneer she had used the day before. This was her investigator voice. "Just landed," I said. "Did something happen during the processing? Did they make bail?" "They are still in holding," Sarah said. "But that is not why I'm calling. We need to talk about the condo development, Azure Heights." I felt a prickle of cold sweat on the back of my neck. "What about it?" "It was a fraudulent application. We proved that." "We proved your application was fraudulent," Sarah corrected. "But after the incident this morning, my team ran a heuristic search on the developer's tax ID and the settlement agent listed on the paperwork. We wanted to see if they had a history of accepting third-party guarantor documents without proper vetting." She paused. In the background, I could hear the hum of a server room or a busy call center. "Stella, we found 12 other applications," she said. I stopped breathing for a second. 12? 12 applications in the last 6 months, Sarah continued. All for units in Azure Heights. All of them followed the exact same pattern. A primary borrower with low income and high enthusiasm, backed by a guarantor who was a distant relative or an estranged family member. In every single case, the guarantor had a high credit score and significant assets, and in every single case, the rush exception protocol was invoked to bypass the standard identity interview. My mind raced, connecting dots I hadn't even known existed. "You think the developer is running a scheme?" "I think the developer is laundering money through phantom down payments," Sarah said. "But here's the part that concerns you. We pulled the metadata on the referral forms for those 12 other loans. In the real estate world, there is often a finder's fee paid to the person who brings the buyer to the table." I gripped the armrest of my seat. "Who was the referrer?" "Dale Powell," Sarah said. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. It wasn't just a desperate father trying to help his daughter buy a condo she couldn't afford. It was a job. Dale wasn't just protecting Harper. He was working for them. He was a bird dog. He was scouting vulnerable, credit-worthy targets, people like me, or uncles, or cousins, and using his influence to leverage their identities into financing deals that were likely never meant to be repaid. The $48,000 he had demanded from me wasn't a down payment. It was likely his cut. Or perhaps it was the buy-in he owed the developers to keep the scheme running. "He is a broker," I whispered. "He is a broker for fraud." "He is a facilitator," Sarah corrected. "And that changes the nature of this investigation entirely. This is no longer a domestic dispute or a single instance of identity theft. This is a federal conspiracy case involving wire fraud and racketeering. The FBI has already been notified." I sat there as the plane came to a halt at the gate. The seatbelt sign pinged off. Around me, passengers were standing up, reaching for their luggage, eager to get into London. I stayed seated. I realized then why Dale had been so aggressive. I realized why he had threatened to ruin my career. It wasn't just ego, it was survival. If I didn't pay, the chain broke. If the chain broke, the people he was working for, people much more dangerous than a bank manager, would come looking for him. He hadn't been protecting Harper. He had been using her as a human shield to cover his own exposure to a criminal enterprise. "Thank you, Sarah," I said. My voice was steady, but my hand was shaking. "What do you need from me?" "We need you to file a formal whistleblower complaint," she said. "Not just the fraud report you filed yesterday. I mean a corporate-level disclosure through your own institution, Marston Ridge. If Dale is named in a federal RICO investigation and he tries to carry out his threat to report you to the licensing board, you need to be designated as a protected witness before he files his complaint. It locks in the timeline. It proves his complaint is retaliatory." "I can do that," I said. "I have access to the portal." "Do it now," Sarah advised, "before you clear customs." I hung up. I didn't get up. I opened my laptop right there on the tray table. Ignoring the flight attendants who were trying to herd passengers off the plane, I logged into the Marston Ridge Ethics portal. I selected the option for external financial crimes reporting. I typed quickly. I detailed the conversation with Sarah. I listed the case number from the bank. I named Dale Powell not as my father, but as the primary suspect in a multi-party real estate financing scheme. I disclosed the extortion attempt. I attached the threat logs. I hit submit. A confirmation banner appeared. Whistleblower protection status, active, reference number, WB779. It was done. I had built a legal fortress around my career. If Dale tried to send his forged documents to my boss now, they would be flagged immediately as evidence of witness intimidation. His attempt to destroy me would only add another 5 years to his sentence. I packed up my laptop and walked off the plane. The air in the jet bridge was cool and damp. I walked through the terminal, following the yellow signs for arrivals. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was an encrypted message from David, my attorney. "David, you need to hear this. Check your secure email. Audio file attached." I stopped near a currency exchange booth. I put in my earbuds. I opened the email. The subject line was simply, "Harper Cooperation/evidence." I pressed play. The recording was grainy. It sounded like it had been taken from inside a pocket or a purse. There was the rustle of fabric, and then Dale's voice cut through the static, loud and clear. "Stop crying. Harper, we don't have a choice. She is the golden goose. She has the credit. She has the license. We just need to scare her enough to make her write the check." There was a sniffle. Harper's voice. "But what if she gets fired? You said you would report her." "I will if I have to." Dale's voice was cold, transactional. "But she won't let it get that far. Stella is weak. She loves her job more than she hates me. She will pay, and once we get the $48,000, the developers release the next tranche of funding, and I get my 6%. We will be set for the year. I don't want to go to jail. Dad, you won't go to jail. If anything happens, we blame her. We say she authorized it, and then got cold feet. Who are they going to believe? The successful banker who ran away to London, or her poor, struggling family?" The recording ended. I stood there in the middle of Heathrow Airport, surrounded by strangers speaking a dozen different languages. Harper had recorded him. She must have done it days ago. when the pressure started to mount. Maybe she had a shred of survival instinct left. Maybe she just wanted insurance. Or maybe, deep down, she knew that Dale would eventually turn on her, just like he turned on everyone else. That recording was the final nail. It proved premeditation. It proved conspiracy. It proved that the threat to my career wasn't a reaction to my refusal. It was the plan from the beginning. He called me weak, I said softly to myself. He had bet everything on the idea that I was weak. He had bet his freedom, his daughter, and his future on the assumption that I would fold under pressure. He didn't understand that, Carbon. Under pressure doesn't fold. It turns into diamond, and diamonds are the hardest substance on earth. I walked toward the immigration control desks. The line was long. I stood patiently, my passport in my hand. My phone buzzed one last time. Another text from David. David. Judge reviewed the packet. The voice note sealed it. Temporary protective order granted. Permanent hearing scheduled for next month. He cannot contact you. He cannot come within 500 feet of you. He cannot mention your name to a third party without violating a court order. Protective order granted. The words looked surreal on the screen. For 35 years, I had been waiting for permission to protect myself. I had been waiting for someone to tell me that I didn't have to set myself on fire to keep them warm. Now, a judge had signed a piece of paper that made it the law. I stepped up to the immigration officer. He was a young man with a tired face. He took my passport. He scanned it. "What is the purpose of your visit to the United Kingdom, Ms. Powell?" he asked. I looked at him. I looked past him, at the gray London sky visible through the high windows. "I am relocating," I said. "For work." "How long do you intend to stay?" "Indefinitely," I said. He stamped the passport. The sound of the ink hitting the page was sharp and final. Entry granted. "Welcome to the UK," he said. I took the passport back. I walked through the automatic gates and into the arrivals hall. I didn't have anyone waiting for me holding a sign with my name. I didn't have a family group chat blowing up my phone with welcome messages. I had a suitcase full of documents. I had a career that was bulletproof. I had a lawyer who was a shark. And I had the absolute, terrifying, beautiful silence of a life that was finally, completely my own. I walked out into the cool morning air of London. I hailed a black cab. "Where to, love?" the driver asked, as he loaded my bag. "The financial district," I said. "I have a lot of work to do." As the cab pulled away, I deleted the contact named Father from my phone. I didn't block it. I deleted it. Blocking implies there is still a connection to sever. Deleting means the data no longer exists, and in my world, if it isn't in the logs, it didn't happen. The black cab dropped me off at a temporary corporate apartment in Canary Wharf. The rain in London was different from the rain at home. It was finer, colder, and it seemed to wash the grime off the streets, rather than just making it wet. I dragged my suitcase into the lobby, the wheels humming on the marble floor. It was the only sound I made. I checked in, took the key card, and rode the elevator to the 35th floor. When I finally sat down on the edge of the unfamiliar bed, I opened my laptop to process the final packet of data that had been syncing to my cloud while I was in the air. The timeline of the last 12 hours lay before me, a digital autopsy of the life I had just amputated. The updates had started coming in mid-flight, pinging my phone somewhere over the Atlantic, but I had waited until I was behind a locked door to fully digest them. The first headline was the one I expected. Harper had been formally charged. The counts were attempted grand larceny and identity theft. It was a heavy blow, but it was the second headline that made the air in the room feel lighter. Dale Powell had been arrested and denied bail. The charges against him were a laundry list of white-collar nightmares: extortion, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, witness intimidation, and by thanks to the wider investigation into the condo developer, racketeering. I opened the secure email from the bank's internal review board. It was short, sterile, and beautiful. Subject: Internal Investigation Case FR-2-9-4-0-1- Final Determination. Ms. Powell, following a review of the audit logs, audio recordings, and the incident report filed by the Main Street branch, we have determined that you acted in full compliance with all security protocols. The activity on your account has been classified as third-party fraud. No adverse action will be taken against your employment or your credit profile. Your diligence in reporting the matter likely prevented significant financial loss. I saved the email to a folder I named Vindication. My employer, Marston Ridge, had been even faster. My transfer to the London office wasn't just approved. It was now being treated as a protective measure. HR had flagged my file to ensure that no external inquiries, specifically from anyone with the last name Powell, could reach me. I was efficient, I was compliant, and I was safe. But the most satisfying piece of data was the update on Dale's threat. He had actually done it, in a final, desperate act of malice before the handcuffs went on. Or perhaps he had scheduled it beforehand. Dale had submitted a formal complaint to the National Association of Compliance Professionals. He had accused me of unethical financial leverage and abandoning fiduciary duty. He wanted to burn my license. He wanted to make sure that if he couldn't have the money, I couldn't have a career. It backfired with catastrophic precision, because I had filed my whistleblower report and the police evidence packet before his complaint was processed. The licensing board didn't open an investigation into me. They opened an investigation into him. The board saw his complaint for exactly what it was, a documented instance of a financial predator trying to weaponize the regulatory system against a whistleblower. The inquiry was immediately redirected. The board forwarded his complaint directly to the district attorney as further proof of his intent to intimidate a witness. He had tried to fire a gun at my head, but he had held it backward. I moved to the next tab, the condo transaction. The entire development at Azure Heights was now a crime scene. The investigators had seized servers and filing cabinets from the developer's main office. It turned out that Dale wasn't the only broker they used, and Harper wasn't the only straw buyer. It was a massive engine of mortgage fraud, designed to puff up the value of the property with fake loans before the developers vanished with the bank's money. By stopping the payment, by creating a scene that brought the police to the lobby, I hadn't just saved myself $48,000, I had kicked over the first domino in a chain that was now crushing a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise. My phone vibrated on the nightstand. I looked at it. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was from back home. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a transcription appeared. It wasn't Dale. He was in a cell without a phone. It wasn't Harper. It was Aunt Janice, Dale's sister. I read the text of the voicemail. Stella, it is your Aunt Janice. I just heard from the lawyer. How could you? He is your father. Harper is your little sister. They are saying Dale could do 10 years. 10 years. Stella, you have to call the district attorney. You have to tell them it was a misunderstanding. You can't let your family be destroyed over money. Please, Stella, be the bigger person. Be the bigger person. That phrase, it was the polite way of saying, be the victim. It was the demand that I absorb the pain so that everyone else could stay comfortable. I didn't feel a pang of guilt. I didn't feel the urge to call her back and explain myself. I felt nothing. It was the numbness of a limb that had been gangrenous and was finally, mercifully, gone. I didn't respond to Janice. I forwarded the voicemail to David, my attorney. 2 minutes later, David sent a reply. I have contacted Ms. Janice Powell. I informed her that you are under a protective order and that any further attempts to contact you on behalf of the defendants will be considered witness tampering. She will not call again. No contact. It was a complete seal. I thought about Harper. My lawyer had mentioned that she was cooperating fully. She was giving them everything. Passwords, emails, dates. She was desperate. She thought that if she helped them bury Dale, maybe I would soften. Maybe I would send money for her legal defense. Maybe I would fly back and hold her hand in court. But I wasn't going to do that. Her cooperation didn't erase the entitlement. It didn't erase the fact that she had walked into that bank ready to steal my life savings, smiling at the teller while she did it. She was only sorry because the check didn't clear. I would not testify against her if I didn't have to, but I would not save her. She wanted to be an adult? This was what adulthood looked like. You make choices, and you live in the wreckage they create. I stood up and walked to the window. The city of London was spread out below me. A grid of lights and gray stone. I was thousands of miles away from the house on Oak Creek Lane. I was thousands of miles away from the dining table where Dale used to sit. Drafting his demands, I was free. I sat back down at the laptop for the final administrative tasks. I opened my phone provider's website. Change mobile number. I selected the option. I chose a new number with a London area code. I confirmed the change. The signal bars on my phone dropped to 0, then bounced back up as the new SIM profile activated. The old number, the one Dale had, the one Harper had, the one Aunt Janice had, was dead. It was disconnected, if they called it now. They would hear a robotic voice telling them that the subscriber was no longer in service, and that was the truth. The subscriber they knew, the Stella who fixed things, the Stella who paid the bills, was no longer in service. I opened my contacts. I scrolled to the group chat titled Family. I didn't archive it. I didn't mute it. I hit delete. Then, I went to the setting that had always given me the most anxiety. Emergency contact. For 10 years. It had been Dale. Then, briefly, Harper. I clicked edit. I deleted the name Harper Powell. I typed in the name of my new firm's global security desk. They were professionals. They would answer the phone. They would know what to do. And most importantly, they would never ask me to bail them out of jail. I saved the changes. A notification popped up in the corner of my screen. It was an email from the London office security team. Subject: Digital Access Badge. Stella Powell. Attachment: ID _badge print ready.pdf. I opened the PDF. It was a picture of my new work badge. The photo was one I had taken myself yesterday. I looked different. My hair was cut sharper. My eyes looked clear. Beneath my name, it didn't say daughter or sister or wallet. It read, Stella Powell, Regional Director of Compliance Strategy. I looked at that digital image, and a sound escaped me. It started as a breath and turned into a laugh. It was a soft, genuine laugh that seemed to fill the quiet hotel room. Dale had promised to burn me. He had promised to turn my life into ash. But as I looked at my clean record, my new title, and the silent phone that would never ring with a threat again, I realized he had failed completely. He hadn't burned my life. He had only burned the bridge that allowed him to reach it. He was sitting in a cell, staring at a wall, wondering how he lost control, and I was sitting in a high-rise in London, wondering which tea I should buy for my new kitchen. Silence. I decided as I closed the laptop. Was expensive. It cost me $48,000 in legal fees, a plane ticket, and the loss of the people who raised me. But sitting here, in the quiet, I knew it was worth every single penny. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed Stella's journey from being the family scapegoat to the architect of her own freedom. I would love to hear from you. Please comment down below and tell me where you are listening to this story from. Are you in the car, at work, or relaxing at home? Let's chat in the comments. And if you enjoyed this revenge story, please make sure to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who need a little reminder that sometimes the best revenge is simply a documented success. See you in the next story.